Rain poured over Atlanta from afternoon until night, cold enough that my clothes clung to my skin. I stood on the porch with my arms wrapped tightly around Zion. He was only 5, his face still red from crying, his eyes closed from exhaustion. The rain slapped against my cheek, but the cold was nothing compared to the numbness settling in my chest. The house behind me had once been the place I thought I would spend the rest of my life. I used to believe that if I tried hard enough and endured enough, this family would accept me because of Sterling. But ever since he died in the plane crash 3 years ago, everything had fallen apart. I had tried to hold on, but today, every door finally shut. Celeste stood in the doorway, her gaze cold as if I had never been her daughter-in-law. "You bring nothing but bad luck," she said, "a leech. This family has fed you and your child long enough." Ella stood behind her, arms crossed, silent in a way that felt deliberate. No objection, no explanation. That silence cut deeper than any insult. It felt like confirmation. I no longer belonged here. I once believed that my sacrifices would make them see me differently, waking up early to cook, doing laundry, and taking extra shifts to help with the bills. But none of it mattered. My suitcase was thrown onto the steps. The thud was so sharp in the rain that it startled Zion awake. He clung to my neck in fear. "Get out," Celeste said one last time, then slammed the door. I stood there for a long moment, unsure of what to do. The rain kept falling steadily. Zion rubbed his face against my shoulder and whispered, voice trembling, "Mom, where are we going?" I had no answer. All I saw ahead was a long, wet, dark road. That was the moment I understood that the two of us truly had no place left to return to. If you've stayed with me and felt even a fraction of Amara's despair, subscribe to the channel and continue this mysterious journey with me. Every follow is a slight push for us to uncover the truth behind these family tragedies together. I dragged the rain-soaked suitcase behind me, holding Zion with one arm while searching for a dry place to stay. The bus station at night was nearly empty, with only a few people curled up on the benches. The smell of old coffee, damp clothing, and the soft hum of announcements made the place feel colder than the rain outside. I sat in a shadowed corner near a vending machine. The rain was still coming down hard. My mind drifted back to the day Sterling left for his final business trip. He turned around, held me tightly, and said he would call once he landed. I never imagined that would be his last call. The image reappeared in my mind, squeezing my chest with pain. I used to think that no matter how hard life got, as long as I had him, I could endure it. But now, even a roof to shelter under was gone. Zion, exhausted, quickly fell asleep. I laid him across my lap and covered him with my thin jacket. Rain had soaked into his hair, and I gently dried it strand by strand. Seeing his tiny face asleep in the cold twisted my heart with worry. I wished I could take him somewhere safe. Just a small room would be enough, somewhere without yelling, without contempt. But right now, all I had in my pocket were a few crumpled bills and a phone on the verge of dying. I placed my hand on Zion's back, trying to share my warmth. I hadn't seen a clear future in a long time. All that remained was the effort to survive tomorrow, no matter how uncertain it looked. The station was so quiet I could hear the rain tapping against the metal roof. I leaned back on the wall, my eyes stinging from fatigue and sadness. For 3 years, I had done everything to keep this family together, and yet here I was, curled up with my son in the corner of a bus station. The weight of being abandoned pressed on me like a heavy blanket. I didn't know what tomorrow held. I only knew that if Sterling were alive, he would never have let me end up like this. The thought tangled my emotions even more, but it was also the only thing keeping me from breaking. Around midnight, headlights suddenly flooded the corner where I sat. A Cadillac Escalade pulled up, its large frame covering nearly the entire sidewalk. The driver's window rolled down slowly. I instinctively pulled Zion closer, preparing for anything. The person in the car tilted her head to look at me. I recognized her, Jordan. But she was nothing like she had been the last time I saw her. Back then, she had been a rebellious girl, dressed however she pleased. Now she looked completely transformed. Her hair was neatly tied back, she wore a dark jacket, and her expression was serious and composed. Her eyes no longer held the avoidance or anger they once did. There was something in her demeanor that left me unsure whether to feel relieved or afraid. She opened the back door and said simply, "Get in." No questions, no hesitation. Her tone was steady, as if she had made up her mind long before arriving. I looked at Zion asleep in my arms, then at the pouring rain outside. I had no other choice, so I got in. Jordan closed the door, and the car eased away from the station. She stared at me through the rearview mirror, her voice low and firm. "You need to hear the truth about Sterling." My heart lurched. Jordan continued, "Sterling didn't disappear the way everyone thinks, and you need to know what really happened." The air inside the car grew heavy. I didn't know whether to fear or hope, only that my life had just turned onto a completely different path. The car stopped in front of a high-rise building in downtown Atlanta. From the parking garage to the lobby, everything was so clean and bright that it made me feel dizzy. Jordan swiped a card in the elevator and led me up to the 25th floor. The apartment unlocked with a soft beep, the door gliding open. Inside was a spacious living room with warm lighting, soft couches, and a tidy kitchen. Zion rubbed his eyes, looked around, then clung to my hand. Just having a roof over our heads and light in the room, even temporarily, eased something inside me. Jordan set a bag of warm towels on the table and told me to dry Zion off first. Her tone was calm, neither warm nor distant. While drying Zion, I quietly observed the apartment. The decor, the items, everything was of high quality. Questions filled my mind. Sterling's family had never mentioned Jordan having a stable job, let alone living in a place like this. Jordan made me a cup of hot tea and set it down in front of me. I thanked her, though I couldn't hide my curiosity. She noticed and simply said, "Rest for now, I'll explain tomorrow." It wasn't avoidance. It was more like she already knew I would need time before hearing the truth. That night, I lay on the sofa while Zion slept in the small room Jordan had prepared. The quiet made it easy for my thoughts to spiral out of control. Jordan stood by the window looking down at the city and said, "Amara, tomorrow you'll learn why Sterling could never come back." I sat up, gripping the blanket. My chest tightened. Jordan didn't add anything else. She just told me to get some sleep. I closed my eyes, but the whole night my heart felt heavy with anticipation. The next morning, Jordan handed me a phone with an audio file already open. Celeste's voice came through first. I recognized every breath, every familiar tone. "That girl needs to get out of this house. She only knows how to drain money. She and that kid are a burden." Her voice was firm and decisive. I tightened my grip on the phone, my lips pressed together. Jordan fast-forwarded to the middle. Celeste's voice returned, this time even more merciless. "I don't want to support those two parasites for another minute." My stomach twisted. I had endured harsh words from her for years, but I never imagined she would talk about her own grandchild like that. Zion was playing with a toy car nearby. I turned away so he wouldn't see my face. Jordan opened another file. This time, it was Ellis. I withdrew the money before he flew out. He doesn't know. Just think of it as him paying back this family. Jordan placed a bank statement in front of me. The withdrawal was made on the exact day Sterling boarded the plane. $200,000, wiped clean from his personal account. I could hardly believe what I was seeing. Jordan pulled out another stack of papers from a drawer. Gambling receipts, transactions from a casino in Mississippi. Celeste's name appeared on multiple entries. All of that money was after Sterling went missing, Jordan said. My hands trembled. All those times Celeste called me useless, a leech, a burden. It had all been to hide her gambling. Jordan sat beside me. Amara, you need to understand that Sterling never spent carelessly. He didn't give money to anyone. He never had any plan to empty his account. She looked at me with steady seriousness. Everything started before he disappeared, and he already knew someone had touched his money. A chill crawled down my spine. Jordan placed her hand on the table, her voice quiet but clear. Amara, I think Sterling was harmed, and I believe my parents were involved. My heart felt crushed in an instant. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence lay right in front of me. Jordan sat down, her hands clasped together. She looked out the window for a moment before speaking softly. Amara, do you know why I left home? I shook my head. Because since I was a child, I was never treated as part of that family. My mother wanted another son to carry on the family name. When I was born, she was so disappointed she refused to hold me even once. Her voice was steady, not shaking, but the old wounds were unmistakable. I grew up hearing things like, useless girl, waste of space. Later, she hit me more often. I only endured it because my brother protected me. When she mentioned Sterling, her voice softened. Sterling was the only one in that house who treated me like family. He always stepped in for me, even when it meant taking the blame himself. She pressed her lips together, fighting to stay composed. He told me I didn't need to be like anyone else, that I just needed to be myself. Without Sterling, I don't think I would have survived that house. I looked at Jordan and realized the bond she had with Sterling was deeper than I'd ever understood. Jordan pulled an old folder from her bag. The day he went missing, I never believed it was an accident. I watched my parents. They weren't grieving. They were scared. That's when I knew I had to find answers. She took a breath and continued. I worked every job I could, saved money, hired people to investigate. Every trail led back to that house. And I'm certain there are still clues Sterling left behind. Jordan looked at me directly. Amara, without you, I can't face them alone. In that moment, every distance between us disappeared. I replayed the audio files, and memories of every day in that house came rushing back. Sterling once told me, if anything ever happens, everything I leave behind will be in the place you touch every single day. When I pieced those words together with what Jordan had said, I understood. The clues were in that house, in our old room, somewhere only I would recognize. Jordan nodded. We have to go back. But only you can get inside without raising suspicion. It wasn't easy to swallow all the humiliation I had endured, but I knew this was the only way. I'll go back, I said. I'll apologize, take the blame, act weak. Celeste will believe it immediately. Jordan frowned. Amara, that's too risky. If my mother realizes you've uncovered anything, she won't let you walk away. I shook my head. She thinks I'm someone who only knows how to endure. That's exactly why I can get in. Jordan stayed silent for a few seconds, then exhaled deeply. All right, she said, though worry showed clearly on her face. Whatever you do, call me right away. I'll be watching from a distance. You need to be careful with every step. She placed her hand on my shoulder. Amara, we can't let Sterling's sacrifice be for nothing. If the evidence is really still in that house, we have to get it. I squeezed her hand lightly. For Sterling and for Zion. I'll see this through. We looked at each other. No more words needed. The battle had begun. The next morning, I returned to the old house. My legs were shaky, but my heart was ready. I wore my oldest clothes, no makeup, and I let my face look worn and exhausted, as if I had truly spent the night wandering. I knocked softly. Celeste opened the door, her frown deepening the moment she saw me. Why are you back here? I dropped to my knees right at the gate, my voice small and trembling. Mother, I'm sorry. I've thought it over. I don't know where else to go. Please give me another chance. She planted her hand on her hip, her eyes sharp and filled with satisfaction. Thought you were so capable, didn't you? In the end, you still come crawling back. I lowered my head, swallowing every emotion rising in my chest. Celeste crossed her arms, watching me like she was enjoying a play where she held all the power. Fine, come in, but from now on, you'd better remember your place. I understand, Mother. I stepped inside, my heart empty but my footsteps steadier because I knew I was going in the right direction. Ellis glanced at me, then went right back to his newspaper. Not a word. That silence weighed heavier than insults. On the very first day, Celeste handed me a long list. Scrub the floors, do the laundry, cook, clean the yard. I did everything without complaint. I acted obedient and submissive, so she would honestly believe I had returned to depend on them. She picked fights on purpose, pouring fish sauce on the floor for me to clean, making me redo an entire pot of soup because it was blander than yesterday. I only bowed my head and said, "I'm sorry." Every insult, every look of contempt, I endured it all. I needed her to believe I was tamed, and after 3 days, she finally stopped watching me so closely. The walls of this hell were starting to crack. One Saturday afternoon, Celeste got dressed up, sprayed perfume, and took her purse to meet her friends at the club. Ellis had already left for the golf course early that morning. The entire house was silent. I padded from the kitchen up to the second floor. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. My old bedroom with Sterling, now Celeste's room, sat at the end of the hallway. This was the moment. I took the small hairpin I hid inside my apron pocket. The lock was old. All it took was a careful twist in the right direction, and I heard a faint click. The door opened. I slipped inside and shut it behind me. The room still carried the scent of Celeste's perfume. None of my belongings remained, but the placement of the wooden dresser, the bed, and the vanity, all were just like I remembered. I went straight to the cabinet where I used to hide my old suitcase. It opened easily, but the suitcase wasn't there. I forced myself to stay calm. I checked under the bed, behind the curtains, and even inside the wardrobe. Nothing. I looked up at the top of the wardrobe, a thick layer of dust, and right in the middle of it was my old suitcase. I pulled a chair over, climbed up, and gently lifted it down. My heartbeat was loud and uneven, my hands trembling slightly. I unzipped it. Inside were the things I once kept. A few old clothes, a scarf, and at the bottom, a carved wooden box. I opened it. It was empty. For a moment, my heart sank, but something felt wrong. I lifted the wedding photo lying inside the box. The back was unusually stiff, like it had an extra layer glued on. I carefully peeled the edge. A tiny memory card fell into my palm. I closed my fingers around it, knowing I had just found a piece of the truth. When I opened the wooden box, I expected to see something inside. Papers, a USB, or at least a note from Sterling. But it was completely empty. I stood still for several seconds, trying to hide the wave of disappointment rising fast inside me. I had risked everything to return to this house. I had endured humiliation to get this box, and now it held nothing. I took a deep breath to steady myself. Maybe Sterling hadn't hidden the evidence inside the box, but rather inside something that came with it. I lifted the wedding photo. The frame was old and the paper backing was slightly swollen. When I touched it, I felt something different underneath. I carefully peeled the edge, making sure not to leave a trace. A small memory card was tucked inside. I closed my hand around it. The earlier disappointment vanished, replaced by a tightening fear. Sterling had hidden it well, and someone had almost found it. I returned everything exactly where it was, leaving only the memory card, which I slipped securely into my bra pocket so it wouldn't fall out. Before leaving the room, I nudged a drawer open slightly, then pushed the chair a little out of place. On the floor, I dragged a faint line, just enough for someone to think the room had been searched, but that nothing was taken. If Celeste discovered the suitcase had been touched, she would suspect me immediately, but if it looked like a break-in, her suspicions would scatter. I checked everything one more time, then quickly stepped into the hallway. The house was still quiet. I headed to the kitchen and washed my hands to make it look like I had been downstairs the whole time. The memory card pressed against my chest, making my entire body feel heavier. That night, after Celeste had gone to bed, I sent Jordan a text. She picked me up at the end of the street. We went up to the apartment and shut the door carefully. Jordan opened her laptop and inserted the memory card. The screen showed 3 videos and 1 audio file. I couldn't look away from the first video. It showed Sterling's back as he sat in his home office. He was talking to someone the camera couldn't fully capture. His voice was low, tense. "This isn't what I agreed to," he said. The other person's voice was faint, almost deliberately whispered. I couldn't make out the words, but the threat in it was unmistakable. Jordan opened the second video. Sterling stood by the window, gripping the edge of the desk. A strange man walked in, thin, wearing a dark suit, sharp eyes. The audio was distorted, but the man's voice was steady. "You need to sign this. Don't make things complicated." Sterling shook his head. "I'm not selling that project. I'm not signing anything." His face showed apparent tension. He glanced toward the door as if afraid someone might overhear. I knew he was careful, but I had never seen him this worried. The third video made my chest tighten. Sterling was sitting alone, head slightly bowed. In the corner of the frame, I could see 3 unfamiliar men talking in rough tones. They mentioned the name Victor several times. One of them said, "If he doesn't sign, we have ways to make him." Jordan rewound the clip, studying it with a deep frown. The final audio file played Sterling's voice, quiet but clear. "I'm being followed. They want my project and my money. If I disappear, Amara needs to know." The last part cut off abruptly. The screen went dark. It felt like something was squeezing my chest tight, refusing to let me breathe. Jordan placed her hand on my shoulder. "Amara." He knew the danger long before, and he left this memory card for you. I lowered my head, tears falling onto the keyboard. Sterling had tried to send a warning, and I had known nothing for 3 years. Jordan opened the final video. The moment the image appeared, I recognized the home office in my in-laws' house. Sterling stood facing someone, his voice sharper than it had been in the previous clips. The person who appeared next made my blood run cold. It was Ellis, my father-in-law. He no longer had his usual calm demeanor. He pointed a finger at Sterling's face. "You're causing trouble for this whole family. You have no idea who you're dealing with. You're not allowed to fight back." Sterling answered firmly, "I'm not signing anything. This is my project. I'm not letting anyone take it." Ellis's voice rose. "You think you're strong enough to stand against them? You're dragging this family into the grave." The two had never spoken to each other like this. I remembered Sterling once telling me, "Dad rarely raises his voice." However, in this video, he was someone entirely different. Jordan slowed the middle section. I heard Sterling clearly. "The Alpharetta project is my work. I've spent 3 years on it. I'm not selling it to them." Ellis responded, "You don't understand. Once they set their sights on you, you only have 2 choices. Give it to them or lose everything." That last sentence made my skin crawl. Sterling stared at him, eyes full of disappointment. Right before the video ended, Sterling held up a stack of papers and said, "The land transfer contract. Who signed this? This isn't my signature." Jordan paused the frame. On the document, the title was clearly readable. Land Conveyance Contract, Alpharetta. This was the clearest clue we had found so far. I looked at Jordan. She nodded slightly. The person behind this contract didn't just want Sterling's project. They wanted him gone. The room grew heavy. This wasn't a suspicion anymore. Everything was becoming painfully clear and far more dangerous. Jordan zoomed into the footage from the second video, the moment the man in the suit entered the room. She paused on his face and adjusted the brightness to make it more straightforward. His face was sharp, jaw rigid, eyes cold. I had seen people like him only in documentaries about underground business networks. Men who didn't need to speak much. One look told you they were dangerous. Jordan opened a file on her laptop and compared each feature. "This guy didn't show up by accident," she said. "He followed Sterling for months." After several minutes of checking, Jordan stopped at a specific photo in the file. His name was Victor Thorne, a known figure in the underground real estate world, acquiring projects through pressure, threats, or using intermediaries to force owners into signing deals. Jordan turned the screen toward me. "Amara, this is the man who truly targeted Sterling's project, and he has enough influence to make anyone disappear." My hands felt cold. Victor wasn't just a random stranger. He was the reason Sterling sounded frightened in the earlier videos, the reason he was being followed, and likely the reason he vanished. Jordan looked at me, voice firm. "We need to find proof that Victor forced my father to sign, and we need to find whatever else Sterling left behind besides these videos." I nodded, a new and stronger determination rising in my chest. "Jordan, we'll see this through to the end." Jordan replayed the second video and slowed down the part where Sterling was sitting at his desk. When he stood up, the camera tilted slightly. The angle shifted downward, revealing the empty space beneath the desk. I looked closely and saw something reflecting light. "Wait," I said, leaning closer to the screen. "Show me that part again." Jordan zoomed in. Under the desk, in the back left corner, was a small black object. When she increased the brightness, its outline became clear. It was a USB drive, taped in place with a thin layer of adhesive. My heartbeat pounded in my chest. Sterling had hidden it there, Jordan whispered. He knew he was being watched, so he didn't even tell his own wife. I swallowed the tightness rising in my throat. If Sterling had to hide something to this extent, things were far more dangerous than I imagined. I stood up, hands clasped together. "That USB is still in the house," I said. "It's the most important piece of evidence. I have to get it." Jordan looked at me with worry etched across her face. "Amara, last time you went in because they thought you were weak and harmless, but if you sneak in again, the risk is much higher." I understood that, but thinking of Sterling facing those men alone, I couldn't wait any longer. "Jordan, he left it for me. If I don't retrieve it, the truth disappears. I have to do this." Jordan looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. We sat down at the table and mapped out every step. I would wait until Celeste and Ellis were out of the house. Jordan would create a situation that forced them to leave for a few minutes without suspecting anything. I would enter the office, retrieve the USB from under the desk, and get out quickly. Jordan placed a small map of the house on the table, pointing out the easiest entry points. "You'll have 5 to 7 minutes at most," she said. "If my mother comes back early, you'll have to escape through the back window. I'll be waiting there." I took a deep breath to steady myself. Let's do it. The next evening, Jordan created an anonymous account on her phone. It contacted someone she called Scarface S, a former loan shark of Ellis and Celeste. I didn't ask for details. I only knew he had once come to the house, demanding money before being chased away. Jordan sent a simple message. "The Ellis house has cash. Good opportunity." No names. No trace. She locked the account immediately. She looked at me. "I know it's risky, but they'll never suspect you. They'll just think the collectors came back for money." I swallowed hard. It was a dangerous plan, but the only one that ensured they'd leave the house long enough. Just as predicted, an hour later, Scarface S replied, "On my way." Jordan let out a small, satisfied exhale. He bought it. My mother will panic the moment they show up. My nerves pulsed painfully. I didn't want that house in real danger, but I also had no safer choice. They would never let me near the office if they sensed even a hint of suspicion. Jordan placed a hand on my shoulder. "Don't worry, they're just there to pressure them. No one wants real trouble." Around 8 p.m., Jordan and I watched the house from a distance. An old car with one broken headlight pulled up to the gate. 3 men got out, rough-looking but not exactly violent. the kind who specialize in debt collection. They pounded on the door and shouted for Ellis. Immediately, the lights inside flicked on. Celeste screamed, "Ellis, there's someone outside!" Jordan looked at me and signaled, "Now!" I ran around the back, slipping into the narrow path that led to the kitchen. The shouting and banging at the front door grew louder, covering the sound of my steps. The path to the office was wide open. I had only one mission left: get the USB before everything returns to normal. I moved quickly down the hallway. The arguments and pounding at the front door created just enough noise to mask my movements. Sterling's office was at the very end, the door slightly ajar. I pushed it gently, careful not to let the hinges creak. Inside, everything was as before. Shelves, the wooden desk, the lamp he always liked. The smell of old wood hit me, tightening my chest. No emotions. Focus. I knelt and reached under the desk. My fingers brushed something hard and flat. The tape at the edge was old. With a light pull, the USB came loose. I gripped it tightly. A small step, but I knew it might be the most important one in all of this. I turned to leave and froze when I heard the front door swing open and footsteps enter the house. The voice wasn't Ellis's. It wasn't Celeste's. I had heard this voice in the videos. It was Victor. "Where are they? This house has evidence. Check everything." My stomach clenched. Jordan had no idea Victor was searching for the same thing. I looked around the room desperately, scanning for a hiding spot. Footsteps approached the office. I slid under the desk, clutching the USB against my chest to keep it from falling. I barely managed to control my breathing when the office door burst open. Victor's shoes stepped inside. I could see every movement through the narrow gap beneath the desk. "Tear the place apart. The USB has to be in this room." His voice was calm, but dripping with danger. I kept completely still. My breaths were shallow, barely audible. Another man circled the room, yanking drawers open, moving the chair. One bend, one glance under the desk, and they would find me. Victor moved closer to the desk. He placed his hand on the tabletop as if thinking. Then he bent down slightly. My heart nearly stopped. A sudden shout echoed from the living room. "Hey, they're running!" Victor straightened. "Move!" They rushed out. I was still trembling, but I didn't dare wait. I sprinted toward the back door, but heard footsteps returning down the hallway. No time. I shoved open the office window and climbed onto the small awning outside. Shouts erupted inside. "There's someone in here!" No turning back. I jumped onto the grass below. Pain shot through my knee as I landed, but I forced myself up and ran toward Jordan's car, waiting several alleys away. Jordan threw the passenger door open as I stumbled toward her. "Did you get it?" I held up the USB. Jordan slammed the gas pedal and the car sped off before anyone could see us clearly. Back at the apartment, Jordan plugged the USB into her laptop. There were several files, but she opened the first audio file first. Sterling's voice came through, breathing heavy, like he was trying to stay calm. "Dad, you can't do this. This is my project." Then Ellis's voice. "You don't know who you're going up against. If you don't give it to them, they'll take it another way." A loud thump followed, like someone had slammed the table. Victor spoke next. "Sterling, signing makes everything simple. If you don't, we'll handle it ourselves." I couldn't make out the last words clearly because of the distortion, but the meaning was obvious. Jordan opened the second file. It was a short conversation between Ellis and Victor, without Sterling. "Can you sign it for him?" Victor asked. Ellis replied, "His signature template is still at home. I can do it." My stomach twisted. Sterling had been pushed into danger by his own father. Jordan clenched her hand into a fist. I suspected, but I didn't think my father would actually go through with it. The last file left both of us silent. Victor spoke clearly. "If he doesn't sign within a week, you know what to do. Make it clean, no trace." Ellis's voice trembled slightly. "He's my son." Victor answered coldly, "That's your choice." I put a hand over my mouth, tears spilling out. Sterling knew precisely what they planned to do to him, and he tried to leave clues for me. Every video, every memory card, the USB, all final messages before he disappeared. Jordan placed her hand on my shoulder. "Amara, we have to find Sterling. Dead or alive, we need to know the truth." I nodded. I wasn't just looking for evidence anymore. I was looking for my husband, and I wouldn't stop. In the last folder on the USB, Jordan found a password-protected file. It took her several minutes to open it. When it finally loaded, it wasn't a video or audio clip. It was a letter Sterling left behind. His voice played over a recorded message, slow, clear, like someone who had accepted that he might never return. "If you're hearing this, it means I no longer have a way to warn Amara. The Alpharetta project has been targeted. Dad signed in my place. I don't blame him, but I have to tell the truth to protect my wife and child." I tried to stay composed, but each sentence felt like it pressed into the deepest wound of my heart. Sterling continued, "If you found this letter, it means you're strong enough to keep going. Amara, be careful. Someone in our family cannot be trusted." My hands tightened together. My heartbeat paused for a split second as the following words came. "Don't trust anyone. Not even Jordan." I turned to look at Jordan. She stood still, stunned. Sterling continued, heavier now. "Jordan has been showing up around the people following me. I don't know if my sister is involved or if she's just being dragged into this. But Amara, keep your distance from everyone, even those you think you can rely on." His tone was a warning, not an accusation. I looked at Jordan. She lowered her head, lips pressed tight. "I know why he thought that," Jordan said, voice rough. She sat down, covering her eyes for a moment before dropping her hand. She didn't want to look weak in front of me. 3 years ago, I lost my phone. I thought it was just negligence. Later, I learned it was stolen by one of Victor's men. Jordan exhaled, eyes reddening. "They used that phone to track me. Sterling saw me show up on their cameras and thought I betrayed him. He misunderstood, but he had no way to verify." I placed my hand on her shoulder. "Sterling wasn't blaming you," I said softly. "He was worried about you." Jordan nodded, eyes glistening but steady. "Thank you, Amara. He's my brother. I would never hurt him." I believed her. In that moment, the distance between us vanished. I looked at Jordan for a long moment before speaking. "We both love Sterling. That part is real." Jordan pressed her lips together and nodded. "Yes, we're on the same side." No more explanations were needed. The misunderstandings, Sterling's fears, our doubts, the chaos of the past 3 years had finally unraveled. Jordan was not a traitor. She was another person trapped in the same storm. Jordan replayed one of the audio clips, listening closely to Victor's voice. "He's the one pulling every string," she said. "My father, the project, the surveillance on Sterling." I nodded. Victor didn't just want the Alpharetta project. He wanted Sterling gone, erased, so the deal could be sealed without resistance. Every clue pointed to him. Jordan looked at me, her voice clearer than ever. "Amara, Sterling might still be alive. If they wanted to stage an accident, he wouldn't have died at that moment." I had always feared, hoping. But now, hope was no longer a luxury. "Then we have to find him," I said. Jordan nodded. "We will. Whatever it takes." That night, we laid out the USB, the memory card, and all the evidence across the table. Piece by piece, everything began falling into place. Not only to uncover the truth, but to find the man who had left all these clues behind for his wife. The search for Sterling had officially begun. While reviewing every tiny detail Sterling had ever left behind, I suddenly remembered something that seemed completely unrelated. The cactus pot he gave me on my last birthday. I had teased him then. Why give your wife a plant full of thorns? Sterling simply laughed and said it symbolized resilience. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. When I mentioned it to Elias, his eyes widened as if something clicked. Amara, Sterling never does anything without meaning. That pot? You still have it, right? I nodded. It was sitting on the windowsill in Jordan's apartment. We checked it immediately. Elias leaned close to the base of the plant, scrutinizing it. One of the lower spines appeared slightly darker in color. Elias used tweezers to pull gently. The spine came off easily, far lighter than a real one would be. He peeled open the thin outer layer. Inside was a tiny piece of hardware, small enough to identify as a tracking chip. I pressed a hand to my chest. Sterling had left me a lifeline long before he disappeared. Elias connected the chip to his computer. A faint signal appeared on the map, a blinking red dot in a remote area north of North Carolina. A chill ran through me. That's the mountains near Asheville, Elias said. If Sterling is being held somewhere, there's a very high chance it's here. Jordan stared at the coordinates for a long moment before whispering. Celeste mentioned Asheville a few times before Sterling disappeared. I thought she was just rambling. No one said another word. We all understood. We had just found our first real direction in saving Sterling. Just as we were preparing to head out, Jordan's phone rang. A strange number from North Carolina. She answered, and a nurse's voice came through. Are you a relative of Celeste Vance? She was in a car accident and is currently in our emergency room. Jordan froze. I saw her hand tremble. What accident? Why is my mother in Asheville? Jordan's voice cracked. We only know she was brought in with trauma injuries. Her documents list an Atlanta address. Please come as soon as possible. Jordan hung up and turned toward Elias and me. She tried to remain calm, but her eyes were clouded with confusion. Something's wrong. My mother hates leaving Atlanta. Why would she be in Asheville? Elias frowned. It could be real, or it could be a trap. Jordan bit her lip, breathing heavily. No matter how much she resented her mother, she couldn't ignore the thought of her being hurt and alone. I have to go, Jordan said. If I don't show up, she'll have no one. I grabbed her hand, worried. It's dangerous, a call at exactly the right time, from exactly the right place. It's too coincidental. Amara, I know, Jordan replied, but I can't turn my back. I couldn't stop her. People who have been hurt the most tend to soften the quickest when the word family is involved. I understood that too well. Jordan packed quickly, taking only a small bag. Before leaving, she hugged me briefly. If something happens, keep going. Don't stop because of me. I watched her disappear behind the door, my chest heavy. A few minutes after she left, Elias looked at me. We just lost an ally, and there's a high chance. Jordan walked straight into a trap. I nodded, my heart tightening. The road ahead was growing more dangerous by the minute, and Sterling was waiting at the end of it. After Jordan left, the apartment felt unusually quiet. Elias looked at me as if weighing something carefully. Finally, he sat down across from me, speaking slowly and low. Amara, there's something I haven't told you. I waited. I'm not just an old friend of Sterling's. I used to work for a group that helps people threatened by underground investors. We're not police and we're not criminals. We do the things the law is too slow to handle. I was surprised, but not scared. His gaze was steady and honest. Sterling helped me during a major case. When he got into trouble, I knew early. But I didn't make it in time. That's my biggest regret. His voice tightened at the last sentence. I understood. Elias owed Sterling his life, and now he intended to repay it. Elias stood, grabbed his phone, opened an encrypted app I'd never seen before, and typed a short-coded message. I'm contacting Uncle Ben, he said. He's the head of the group. If we're going to hit the place where Victor is holding Sterling, we need his team. Who is Uncle Ben? I asked. A good man, Elias replied. A bit strict, but he's never abandoned anyone in desperation. The phone buzzed once. A single message. 10 hours. Send the coordinates. Elias looked at me. He agreed. Only then did I feel my lungs fully expand. We weren't alone anymore. Elias opened the map and marked the location deep in the North Carolina forest. It sat on a mountainside, reachable by only one road, the rest surrounded by steep cliffs. Victor prefers remote villas to hide people, Elias explained. We'll need 2 teams, one attacking from the front, one circling behind. He handed me a small earpiece. Amara, you won't be on the front line, but you need to be there. Sterling will recognize you before anyone else. I nodded, anxious yet unshakably determined. I only want one thing, I said. Bring Sterling home. Elias responded simply, we will. The next 10 hours passed in tense preparation as the team checked the routes through the forest, stocked medical supplies, and planned escape paths. Uncle Ben's team arrived near dawn, silent, precise, efficient. By the way they moved, I knew this wasn't their first time confronting something like this. When the vehicles finally rolled toward North Carolina, I clasped my hands tightly. Sterling, please hold on, I'm coming for you. By late morning, the convoy came to a halt about 400 meters from the villa. From a distance, I could see the house sitting right at the edge of a massive cliff, surrounded by a forest and jagged rock. The air was cold, quiet enough that I could hear the leaves rustling. Uncle Ben signaled the team to split. Team A, attack the front entrance, create noise, cause chaos. Team B, cut the power, neutralize the guards. Elias and I circle around the back and slip in through the kitchen door. Another team, block the escape route. Elias bent down and whispered, "Stay right beside me. Don't run off on your own." I nodded, gripping my earpiece. The operation began. A small explosion echoed from the front, Team A breaching the door. Then came shouting, crashing, and gunfire reverberating through the forest. It didn't last long, but long enough to throw the entire villa into confusion. Elias pulled me down behind a tree. "Go, the back path is clear." We sprinted to the kitchen door. The lights inside flickered. Team B had already cut the power. Everything was descending into chaos exactly as planned. The kitchen door was cracked open, with only one guard nearby, but he rushed to the front after hearing the noise. Elias signaled me to stay put, then quietly slipped forward and took him down within seconds. I stepped inside, my heart pounding. This was where Sterling might be held. I looked around, trying to recall what Sterling once described in the video, a wooden house with a basement. Near the cliffside, Elias whispered, "Downstairs, follow me." I swallowed my fear and moved deeper into the dark villa. Sterling was here. I could feel it, a sharp, unmistakable certainty, and I was about to reach him after 3 years of silence. Elias led me down a narrow staircase to the basement. The deeper we went, the clearer the voices became. Not screaming, but a tense conversation. When the basement door swung open, I saw Sterling tied to a chair in the middle of the room. He was much thinner, with an overgrown beard, but his eyes were still bright and alert. Right beside him was Jordan, her hands bound behind her, a bruise on her cheek. My heart clenched. He was alive, but so weak. Victor stood before them, hands in his pockets, posture dripping with confidence. He looked at Sterling as if admiring an expensive item he had finally captured. In the corner of the room, I saw Ellis and Celeste. Ellis kept his head down, hands trembling, while Celeste looked pale, as if she no longer understood what was happening. Perhaps Victor had forced them down here as well. Sterling looked at them, his voice hoarse. "Dad. Mom. Why are you here?" Neither answered. Both avoided his gaze. Victor twirled a gun casually in his hand like a toy. "It's time to end this, Sterling. You've dragged this out long enough." Jordan tried to lift herself up. "Victor, if you have any sanity left, let him go. He's my brother." Victor laughed. "You really love your family, don't you? Your dad signed the fake contract, your mom blew through the money, and you lost your phone and dragged half the hired muscle to my doorstep." He shrugged. I'm just finishing what needs to be done. I gripped the wall edge, forcing myself not to reveal my presence. Elias whispered, "Wait for my signal. Don't move yet." Victor turned to Sterling. "The Alpharetta contract is almost wrapped up. I only need the last USB. Your lovely daughter-in-law took it." He laughed, jerking his chin at Jordan. Then he raised his voice. "I know you're here. If you want Sterling alive, bring out the USB." I forced myself to stay composed. Victor didn't know we had the original and had prepared a fake one. Elias whispered, "It's time. We use the decoy." I stepped out of the shadows. Everyone froze. Sterling, Jordan, Ellis, Celeste, and Victor. I held up the fake USB, steadying my hand. "This is what you want." Sterling's eyes widened, filled with both relief and fear. "Amara, stay back." I gave a slight shake of my head, assuring him. The fear inside me was real, but I knew this was the only way. Victor snatched the USB from my hand and plugged it into the laptop set on the table. He stared at the screen. The loading bar filled. The files opened. Everything looked real. Exactly the way Victor wanted to believe. He smirked, triumphant. "Good. We're finally done." He turned, aiming the gun at Sterling. "Now I don't need you anymore." A sharp crack echoed. Not Victor's gun. The gun in his hand flew sideways, clattering onto the concrete floor. Victor spun around, stunned. A tall figure stood in the basement doorway. Dark coat, gun still raised. Uncle Ben. His voice was deep, steady. Not needing to shout, "Hands on your head!" His team surged in instantly, encircling the entire room. No one managed to react. Within minutes, law enforcement, working with Uncle Ben's team, flooded into the basement. Victor was handcuffed before he could make a move. His men were taken down just as quickly. Ellis and Celeste, shaking, were pulled aside for questioning. Jordan's restraints were cut. I ran to Sterling and threw my arms around him. He looked at me, voice weak but clear. "I knew you would find me." I couldn't speak. I could only hold him tight. After 3 years, I finally touched him again. During the investigation, Victor confessed to everything. Forced contract signing, staging accidents, unlawful detainment, extortion, witness intimidation. Both the original USB and the decoy USB were handed over to the police for comparison. There was no escape route left for him. Ellis and Celeste also faced multiple charges: participating in forged signatures, illegal transactions, assisting in covering up Victor's criminal activities. Celeste broke down crying as she was handcuffed, while Ellis only bowed his head silently. They were taken into the transport vehicle under the watchful eyes of Jordan and Sterling. Jordan turned her face away, saying nothing. Sterling simply sighed, as if accepting that this pain had finally reached its end. Sterling was taken to Asheville Hospital. His body was weak, but his spirit remained strong. He held my hand the entire time as he was settled into the hospital bed. "I thought I'd never see you again," he whispered. I placed my hand on his cheek. "I searched for you in every single clue you left behind, and I'm never leaving you again." He smiled, for the first time in 3 years. A few days later, Sterling was strong enough to explain everything. He had known Victor was tracking him. He pretended to die in the accident to throw them off. But his plan was sabotaged when Victor pushed further, keeping him as leverage to force him to sign. I thought disappearing for a few days would reveal who was following me. But everything spun out of control, Sterling said. I held his hand tightly. "I know, but it's over now." He nodded and rested his head gently on my shoulder. 3 years of darkness ended with the very thing we had fought so hard to uncover, the truth, and his return. A few weeks later, Sterling was healthy enough to be discharged from the hospital. I held his hand as we entered Jordan's apartment, the place where Zion and I had once taken refuge. Zion froze the moment he saw his father, then ran and jumped into Sterling's arms. Sterling knelt down, hugging him so tightly it looked like he was afraid everything would disappear the moment he let go. Zion sobbed, "Dad, where did you go for so long? I missed you." Sterling pressed him against his chest, voice trembling. "I know, I'm sorry. I won't ever leave you again." I stood beside them, feeling a weight lift off me. My little family was whole at last. Jordan visited us over the weekend. The bruise on her face had almost healed, and her eyes were brighter than before. Elias came with her, holding the door for her as she walked in, his hand instinctively brushing her back protectively. The way they looked at each other. I understood something new was beginning between them. Jordan sat on the couch smiling. I think I actually like having someone stand by me when things get dangerous. Elias scratched his neck, a little embarrassed. "I just want to make sure you're safe." Jordan glanced at him, smiling softly. "I know." Watching them warmed my heart. After so much loss, they deserved a new beginning. The case closed, and Ellis and Celeste were sentenced to prison. I didn't attend the final hearing. Sterling understood when I told him, "I choose to let go, but not forget. Forgiveness is for me, not for them." He nodded, a lighter look in his eyes, as if a heavy burden had finally lifted. I knew the past couldn't be erased, but it no longer controlled my life. The storm had passed, and I chose to move forward. That morning, I woke earlier than everyone else. Sterling and Zion were still asleep, father and son lying peacefully beside each other. I stood by the window, watching the first light of dawn filter through the glass. For the past 3 years, I had lived through fear, loss, betrayal, and moments so dark I thought there was no way out. But what brought me here, to this very moment, was the tiny spark of belief I kept alive even when it flickered. Belief in the truth, belief in Sterling, and belief in myself. I had learned the most important lesson of all. No one can pull you out of the abyss if you let go of your own hand. Good people appeared at the right moments. Jordan, Elias, Uncle Ben. But if I hadn't taken each step, opened every clue, dared to face every wound, today would never have arrived. Sterling once left a message. You have to be stronger than anyone thinks you are. Now I finally understood. I turned back to look at the two of them still sleeping, my heart lighter than it had been in years, like taking a full breath after a long journey underwater. I didn't know what the future held, but there was one thing I knew. I had stood firm after every storm, and this sunrise, it belonged to me. No matter how many times life knocks us down, as long as even a spark of faith remains, we can rise again, because no one can save us except ourselves.